bias there. Today, we're going to talk about a lot of things. But before we go there, we are 7 days away from the Impact Driven Leader Summit in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, July 29th and 30th. We have amazing speakers that are coming. Jake Thompson, Graham Cochran, Katie Casada, and John C. Maxwell. It'll be an amazing event. It'll be a great time to get around people. And in this environment we are now, to find people that are destined to be their best in leadership, because that's what it's about. We're going to talk a little bit about that today, but I'm excited. You can go to that event still. There are tickets available. Go to tylerdickerhoof.com. We'll make sure we have a link in the notes here. You can click on Work With Me and Annual Summit. There's also a pop-up. So make sure you grab your ticket. Come to that event, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, July 29th and 30th. We start in the afternoon of the 29th, go through the day on the 30th. And it'll be an amazing event. The weather looks like it's supposed to be spectacular.
I'm
like
amped up for it.
And gorgeous.
I am amped up for that event. It's on a beautiful lake with amazing people. We're going to learn so much. I'm excited.
I reached out to Bieber. His wife is about due, so he's not able to make it. But I mean, it's just a short little boat ride across the lake for him, and just it is what it is. But
it is what it is.
Yeah. Alex, how you doing, man?
I'm good. We got
some stuff to talk about.
Yeah, we got a lot to talk about. A lot of breaking news over the weekend.
You survived the technological meltdown on your travel.
The meltdown, I survived it. It was only an hour delayed, which shockingly, I know a lot of people weren't. Which was nice because I was flying literally while it was happening right before. Yeah. And then President Biden is dropping out of the race.
He has. Yes.
Which is a very interesting dynamic in terms of leadership in the country and where things are headed.
Yeah, it's obviously our lead today. If you're watching it, it's not new to you. You can't turn your head, whether it's on social media, any media, and not see the news, not see the almost reinvigoration to the Democratic Party's campaign. Obviously, there's a lot of money that's getting unlocked. I read something this morning that overnight, the Democratic Party pulled in $50 million worth of support. Those things obviously will go to advertisements, will go to trying to either shore up this nomination for Kamala, or is it going to be someone else? And you just mentioned a moment ago that you think it's going to be somebody else.
I don't think it's going to be so linear. We were talking off camera just before we went live, and we were talking about Kamala and the reinforcement from President Biden and a few others that we support Kamala. And I have a hard time believing that, because if you look at the polls and you look at the data, she does not have a strong chance. There's less of a probability that she can beat Trump than Biden could have. And I just don't think there's some smart people in there. I don't think they're just going to settle for her and go, yeah. I think it's actually, there's probably a lot of discussions, debates going on in DC right now of who this person should be. I think this is just a stopgap.
There's a couple points that I want to cover here. I made notes to talk about this. And first of all, I just mentioned the whipsaw. Here we go. And we talked a little bit about this 7 days ago in our Monday Newswire. We were talking about the attempted assassination of a former president, a candidate for president, and just kind of the shock and awe, and yet the desire from many different leaders. And then President Trump at the Republican National Convention saying, hey, we got to bind together. We got to be unified. We can't make this so ugly. We go through the week, and here we are today, and we're talking about Biden seemingly, his choice, his words to step down, but for all intents and purposes, forced out. There's a lot of people that were restricting money. We weren't going to back you. You kind of read in between the lines, and he was forced out. You think about it, here we are, the 11th hour, quite honestly, of his term of the, run to president, and he's all of a sudden bowing out. Couple that with a health challenge, COVID. And you really look at this and just this pendulum swing and this call for unity. And yet what I've picked up in the last 12 to 24 hours is the amount of vitriol. And it's just kind of like, you are less than human if you consider anyone other than Kamala. And it's just kind of like, oh, how did we get here so fast? Like, even in, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were discussing this, and like, even in her words, And man, I employ her. Hey, go run for president. Do that. Absolutely. Set a precedent. Go do it. But run because you're the best potential leader, not because the other person is Donald Trump. Go run because you have a vision and a desire to make this country what it is not today, because that's the idea of leading towards a vision. And yet in her announcement, it was, I am going to beat Donald Trump. And it's like,
what's the plan? Yeah. What are your policies? Why don't we lead with like plans and policies and execution? And it does feel like the tip of the spear is like, how do we just beat this person? Yeah. And then we'll figure out
which
all the
I
other
think
stuff
led
out later.
on a lot of the animosity, because instead of saying, oh man, she's got a plan to really make this country better in some way. And you wonder, what is going to be, is she going to just toe and party with what Biden kind of set forth, or is she going to be different? My hope, she's a different person, that she brings in something different. I mean, that's what every leader needs to do in order to, one, have a connection and influence and connect with people and bring them in. Right. In everything that I've seen so far. And I just watched a news conference just a couple minutes ago, and it is, I am going to do this because Joe was such a great president, and I'm just going to be the next one to carry the baton. It's like, you can't just grab a hold of the baton and start running. You got to bring something to the party. And I hate to use that kind of, connected terms, but that's what's challenging to me. Yeah. And even you go back, and we didn't talk about this last week because we had not heard it yet. But if you go back to the Trump Biden debate, and it was pretty composed until they got about halfway, 3/4 of the way through it. And then it was like two grumpy old men. I've made that reference before. It was just like the movie. I've seen Classic. It before. It was
Walter Matthau, Jack Lemmon,
absolutely just going at each other. Can't figure out what they're barking at each other about. And it was kind of like that. But then all of a sudden you saw the Republican National Convention. He started to bring in the policy, started to bring in, these are the things that we need to correct. And the biggest thing that I gathered from that was we have to fix energy. That is a main staple. And we have to correct some of the social things that are just, whether it's the immigration side of it, whether it is the cost of living, which again ties back into energy, but we have to find a better path forward. Taxes, and that's what I heard, whether it's fixing taxes, meaning like, let's be pro-business so we keep jobs here. Just in the last 2 weeks, we've seen major U.S. manufacturers say, we're out, we're going to a different country.
Yeah, automotive
for jobs.
Industry, he mentioned.
Yeah, John Deere announced that they're shutting down factories, taking them overseas. So you're starting to see some of those staples of American workforce that are starting to pull away. And it's like, he, in his speech, said, hey, we need to bring that back in. It's like, okay, those are relevant. I think those are absolute relevant issues in our country. Obviously, the platform that has kind of been largely on the Democratic side, and we'll see probably more, is the reproductive rights to some of the other social welfare things. Like, okay, great, but like, what are you going to do different?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because I'm interested to see who speaks and what happens at the DNC here coming up soon. Yeah, not far away, and just to understand their plan and their strategy of how they're going to, positively enhance and move this country forward. Whether that is around immigration or business, taxes. The social part of it, that's one thing, but I do think that a lot on the ballot is around how do we create a healthier and happier middle class and affordability. Like that's what I would say majority of Americans care about more so than anything right now. I would say if you were going to take just the majority, not everyone, I'm just saying like the most of the middle class is like, how do we move forward and bring costs down? Food is expensive. Energy is super expensive. Everything is. And we seem to be kind of stuck and like, we're not making more money. We're kind of staying the same, but things are more expensive. We can't afford housing. Like, I want to see the plan that they set forth, and I hope it's not like a bashing of the one side and like how good we've done, but like more of like, hey, this is our plan to execute on the country, and we'll see. But right now, I don't know what their plan is and who's going to be their candidate. Again, I don't think it's going to be Kamala.
And that to me is something that will be very interesting. I've shared this with you. I've shared it with other listeners. One of the books that I'm reading, part of my daily read, is The Bully Pulpit by Doris Kearns Goodwin. And it talks about the rise of publication media in the turn of the 20th century. You had Taft and Roosevelt who ran to president. Well, in 1912, after Taft's first term, Roosevelt had served 2 terms. He had served after the president. He was a vice president for, the name has escaped me. I don't think it was McKinley, but he was the VP, came in, got sick, died. So he filled out that term. He ran again, filled another term, chose not to run for his 3rd or 2nd elected term, and then comes back and realizes, oh, I still want to be in politics. And man, I don't like exactly how things have gone. And that was actually the election that the majority of the state primaries began. Yeah. And the reason why is it was a convention where you just kind of go and you say who you want to be the president, and yet it wasn't by popular vote. And so they brought in a lot of state primaries in that election to say, hey, who do we want to represent? Ironically, Teddy Roosevelt won the primaries. However, there was enough states that still had conventions, not a primary election, that Taft ended up getting the nomination. Well, Taft gets the nomination, and then everyone that sided with Roosevelt said, hey, we're going to go start our own party. We're going to leave the Republican Party because we're more progressive. Well, in the midst of that, on the Democrat side, Woodrow Wilson was running to get the nomination, ends up getting the nomination. He is considered the very progressive Democrat, like more of a middle line. So everyone that was progressive that wanted to go with Roosevelt ended up saying, no, we'll just go over there with Wilson. And it kind of left Roosevelt in the dark. And so Wilson ended up winning the election, much because the Taft and Roosevelt sides were torn within the party. And so I share that history. I didn't know any of that. I'm reading it right now, and it's kind of funny how it's showing up in our world today. Are we going to get to a point where, again, we have people that want to back Harris, and then people that want to back somebody else that appears over the next 30 days? Or is there this tear in the Democratic Party that actually undermines everyone in the Democratic Party? You know, it happened years ago. When Bill Clinton ran for president, you had Ross Perot that was running as an independent. And it was cited from a lot of political historians that Ross running actually kept Bush. I think it was Bush that was running at that point. I may be wrong there. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments. That's great. That, it took votes away from him that he didn't have enough to secure the presidency. So it's really interesting as we potentially see this play out, both within the Democratic Party. It's like, who's going to rise to the top? Who's going to be that? And how does that actually affect the end election?
I think, could you imagine all the lobbying going on right now?
I mean, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah.
I'm going to phrase to you how I phrased it to other. You will see more backstabbing, whether it's behind the curtains or in front, in the next 2 weeks than I think we've seen in a while. I really, and here's the point, and I want to tie this into leadership. And I made this note. What happens when a leader steps down? What happens when a leader steps down rather than passes the baton? Because there's a bigger story here, and it isn't political. And we've talked a little bit of political. It could be political party. I don't care. Just quit fighting with each other. If I want to vote for one candidate, if I want to support, then fine. I'm still a person. And I think people still lose that. They lose that and identify you are less than a person if you could even have an opinion one way or the other. You have to have this opinion or you're not a person. Quit that bullshit. Just let people have their rational decisions, and that's okay. Number 2 is when a leader steps down and they don't pass the baton, there is this vacuum that sucks on the entire organization. We've seen it in business. We're seeing it right now in political party. Yeah. And this lack of succession. And it really harkens to something bigger in our country. There's many organizations that are going through this same thing. You have an older generation of leadership, and they still think I am the best option. And yet, maybe it's cognitive decline. Maybe it's health capacity. maybe it's just, oh, my vision is no longer long-term enough. I mean, here's the question. It's like, to me, the president needs to have a 5 to 10 year vision. Yeah. Because much of what you're working on is that. It's like, is Biden capable of that? Even to this point, is Trump capable of that? Mm-hmm. And I think it's interesting bringing in Vance. All right, that's a someone older, but you see so many organizations today that we're fighting through this because we've almost skipped a generation of leadership. Yeah. You know, much like we went from Trump to Vance. That's going from baby boomer to millennial. The Gen X is totally wiped out there in that, you know, change of generational leadership.
Yeah, they went right to Vance is a millennial. He's 39. He's a older millennial. They just jumped it, and maybe that was, I would guarantee you that's strategic, right? They're like, we're going VP real young. We messed up the generation before. Let's start young here, and maybe they're thinking 20, 30 years from now. Yeah. And then, you know, with President Biden, you know, the guy served 50 years. You know, I think we all saw this coming. I don't think anyone was surprised by it. And now it's like, okay, what's going to happen next? And you bring up so many good points. I mean, this transfer of leadership, and the passing of the baton, and who does it go to? And, you know, we just don't know so much about what has transpired behind the scenes. I mean, this is one of the problems with politics, is the behind the scenes lifting of the veil, and the lobbying, and who's talking to who. And it all comes down to money. Who are the multi-billionaires that are going to be supporting who? And when the money goes, no, I'm not supporting you, I'm supporting this person. And then this billionaire goes, no, I want the, and I do think we're going to see a lot of fallout. It's going to be really interesting over these next 2, 3, 4 weeks. But ultimately we're going to get to someone somewhere. But who do you have someone? Are you like thinking, you know, about that? Who it could be? Do you have like
on the you know,
if it's not
other
Kamala,
than Harris?
Yeah, other than Harris, like, do you have?
Oh man, I certainly don't know. And here's the funny part about that: I'm not deep into politics. I don't pay a bunch of attention to it. I just choose not to for a lot of different reasons. And I've paid more attention to the political sphere in the last month, from the debate through today, than I probably have in the previous 44 years of my life. And just be honest, I just don't. Yeah. I have zero tolerance for the BS. And the you know, the undermining that it seems to bring about. And so I don't know a lot of the players in the Democratic Party. I read up a little bit about it this morning, the Kentucky governor to the Illinois governor to a few of these other governors in
maybe the governor.
Yeah, there you go. The thing that's interesting to me is, you know, again, whether it's in this political sphere or not, who's that next leader that is trying to bring people together? Because I'm not seeing that. There's not someone stepping forward today as a representative in the Democratic Party that said, hey, again, thank you, Joe. Now let's come together as a party, and either that called to get behind Harris, or, hey, we need to serve people in a better way, because if we can't acknowledge that people in this country are at a tougher economic spot now than they were 4 years ago, then our head is so buried in the sand, we aren't actually talking to people. The number of layoffs, the numbers of, you know, it's, of course you want to cite numbers to justify a position that, oh, inflation this year is up, you know, 3%, but we're probably going to have a higher unemployment number this month than we've had, seeing the number of employments, and it's not a seasonal, usually high. I mean, kind of sort of with some of the harvest non-farm, but on farm, but it's also, it's like, what are you doing to recognize that our energy is twice the cost of what it was? Well, energy touches everything. Yeah. Every ounce of food you eat, that price is affected by energy. Mm-hmm. Every single consumable that comes into your house is affected by energy. And yet we've not had a plan to say, oof, energy costs are really costing us. Yeah. And I think that's where, again, you can look at, all right, we have a lot of social welfare programs. Okay. Not saying those are bad, but how do we pay for those? well, we're going to tax the higher income. Well, here's how that game works is if you're going to get higher taxes, you're going to manipulate your income so you have less taxes. You're not looking at saying, how can I push that farther to benefit everyone? And you're like, I'm going to play the backwards game. And that's just how it works and having to accept that. So it's kind of like those two big things are going on in our country. How are we going to create a better plan? Because we know how people have reacted the last 3 and 4 years.
I mean, you're absolutely right. You're spot on. I guess the only thing we will have to see. We will have to see what happens and what unfolds. And it is almost like it is a Netflix Succession series. Wasn't that a show?
Yeah, that was the show, Succession.
We're like, there's going to be a lot of documentaries and also narrative series on like what has transpired in this time,
and how it happened, the behind the scenes pulling of the strings,
everything.
But here again, I want to go back and kind of keep a leadership tilt on this. And one of the things I've learned, I didn't run relay race. I didn't run track. I don't know if you did.
I did.
But I do understand like the 4x100, for example, the 4x400, and the 4x, whatever is there's a position on the track to pass the baton.
Correct.
If you pass it too early, it's a penalty. You pass it too late, there's a penalty. There is a window to pass the baton, and it means going from one person to the next, and they grab a hold of it and they go run with it.
And there's a technique to it.
Absolutely. There's a technique to maximize the speed and efficiency and make sure that the baton gets passed without getting dropped. It's pretty hard not to sit here and look and say, from a candidacy of president, the Democratic Party has completely fumbled that entire thing.
Yeah, it seems so.
I mean, the only reason it seemingly is here, not by choice to say that Harris is the better candidate. It is, Joe can't finish his leg. We got to figure out who can finish this. And, we'll just kind of throw up a baton and see if someone catches it. And
I think,
the problem with that is that's not the best way to create succession. And I think a lot of organizations need to take note. I don't care what your political alignment is, but say, do we have a good plan in place? Are we making sure we're passing the baton? And I brought this up with a friend last week, and he shared it it's actually a gentleman that's a part of the Impact Driven Leader Roundtable. And I shared this lesson with him that I learned several years ago. And it's the 80-20 rule. If you're familiar with Pareto's principle, it's, 80-20 rule is 80% of the results come from 20% of the work. Mm-hmm. Well, here's another twist on it. And I've learned this from, I believe Craig Rochelle taught it, is if someone can do a job 80% as well as you can, you need to give them the job. Because that allows them opportunity to grow, to get better. And the other part of that is if you wait until they can do it as good or better than you, then you have compromised whatever that organization can and is doing, because there was a gap for them to gain in that either you came down or they rose to it. But either way, you're not able to complement each other and go on. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like if we go back to this relay race and the baton. It's best that we are both running at the active pace. Like I know from the track, you start running, you run collectively together to a point where you grab the baton. So when you're grabbing the baton, you're already pretty much at a full pace. If you stop, they hand it to you, you grab it, and then you go run with it. You're behind the other people that are running at pace. And that's what I see going on here as an example in leadership transition that is going to cause problems.
Well, Tyler, I have a question for you. I love the parallels, into business. If you're in an organization, right, that is fractured, right, and where there's a lot of different people lobbying for someone else and this person to be the leader and this is why, and there's a lot of uncertainty, what was the mistake that was originally made? Is that because, where does that happen, or how does that happen within a business?
I believe it comes back to the idea of immortality. I will be here forever. If I'm the leader, one of the great lessons I've learned in life, and I was talking to a new friend last week about this, and whether it comes from certain teachers, I don't know who, and I've taken this on. Your job and your role, if you're a leader, is to hire your replacement, to develop your replacement, to groom your replacement. And if you're sitting there and saying, no one can ever replace me, you are the lid, you are the death of your organization. There has to be someone to replace you, because either you're going on to do things that no one else can do, or they're better than you, and that's okay. And so this idea of not passing the baton, of waiting this long, I would say the absolute fault to the Democratic Party, to President Joe Biden, is thinking no one else could do a better job than him. I'm not saying he did a bad job. I'm not getting into that. But the idea of, you understand the runway on you carrying the baton is coming to a close. Whether it's your physical ability or not, you just understand at a certain point, the best thing for him to do, this would have never happened, but if he thought, I need to find somebody else, then he needed to say, I'm not running, but I'll be your vice president, and I'll be here along with you. Have we ever done that? I don't know. Why not? I'll be your best advisor. Let's get you into place. I'm here walking with you. And I know so many other former presidents have done that. It's Bush and Clinton actually had a tremendous relationship. Like, it's written about in their books, and they share about it. It's like they became very, very close friends, and Bush relied heavily on Clinton, the younger Bush. Relied heavily on him, and they supported each other through the entire presidency. 9/11, Bush was relying on Clinton. He had only been in office, a handful of months. He was relying on him to help him. And I think it's again interesting where that could have happened coming into this election, and yet it didn't. And the fault there is thinking, I am the best. Hate to break it to you. That's your ego talking. That's your, arrogance. That's maybe your insecurity talking. It's not possible. Help someone usher in someone else. And I think that's been the major downfall, or the major, catastrophe here.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't want to end on something negative, but that's kind of where my mind goes when you mention that, when there's weakness or uncertainty within an organization, it really opens up places of vulnerability. Yeah. And I think we're in a pretty vulnerable space right now until at least the election, as a country. But you can make the parallels into a business, right? When there's uncertainty and fracturing, like that's when typically things break down. So I hope that doesn't happen here. But typically,
well, I mean, here's to end on that. I think that's a risk that's always run as you run into an election cycle with how much, the job of presidency is a pretty highly involved job, and a lot of different advisors. But when you're trying to run a campaign and be president, man, it can get real challenging. And now I think, whether it accept it or not, the words are, Joe Biden is not capable to do another term at presidency. And then you start to question, how capable is he to finish out the next 7 months? Yeah. How capable is he to get to January? I don't know, but those questions start popping in. And then it's like, how much does that set our country up for some type of liability on a international stage or a domestic stage? That's something that has to be acknowledged and or digested. Yeah. And that's a difficult spot. Who knows how much we've ever been here, and if we have been here.
That's a good point.
It's a challenge. All right. To wrap on today, thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. A reminder, Impact Driven Leaders Summit, July 29th and 30th, just a week from today, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Still tickets available. Click on the link in the description, the show notes as well. You can go to tylerdickerhoff.com, click on Work With Me Annual Summit. Would love to see you there. Till next time, choose to lead with impact.